The applause crashed through the opera house like thunder, sharp and sudden, tearing Rosalind Thorne from sleep. She gasped softly, her heart pounding, disoriented by the noise and the warmth pressed against her cheek. For a single terrible second, she thought she was still dreaming. Then she realized she was leaning on someone. Her face was pressed against a man's shoulder, firm beneath fine wool that smelled faintly of cedar and something darker. Expensive, unmistakably expensive. Heat rushed to her face as she straightened in panic, her silk glove catching on the velvet seat. She had fallen asleep on a stranger. The man beside her did not move right away. He sat rigid, composed, as if he had been aware of her weight for far longer than she wanted to imagine. Around them, the audience rose in a polite rustle of fabric and conversation. Rosalind felt it instantly. The glances, the curiosity, the quiet judgment aimed directly at their private box. "I am so sorry," she said quickly, her voice unsteady. "I did not mean to." The man turned then, slow and deliberate. He was younger than she expected, perhaps in his early 30s, with dark hair brushed neatly back and sharp blue eyes that assessed her without warmth. He would have been handsome if not for the cool authority in his expression, the kind that suggested he was used to being obeyed. "Did not mean to what?" he asked calmly. "Fall asleep during one of the season's most anticipated performances, or use a complete stranger as your pillow." Her hands twisted in her lap. The emerald dress Felix grimly had loaned her suddenly felt too tight, too loud, too obvious. "Both," she admitted. Then, desperate for escape, she added, "Where is Mr. Terry?" Grimly? The man's brow lifted slightly. "The gentleman who abandoned you here?" Abandoned. Her stomach dropped. Felix had promised he would be beside her. Sit quietly, enjoy the opera, 'cause no trouble. He had made it sound harmless. Simple. "I have no idea where he went," the man continued, standing smoothly and offering his hand. "But you have created a rather interesting situation, miss." She did not take his hand. "I should leave. I am afraid it is far too late for that." He tilted his head toward the opposite boxes. Several women watched openly now, fans fluttering, whispers exchanged. One raised her opera glass directly toward Rosalind. "They have been watching for nearly 40 minutes, he said lightly. "Watching you sleep on my shoulder with what I can only describe as fascination." Her chest tightened. "Why did you not wake me?" His smile was sharp. "Because you solved a problem for me." Before she could ask what that meant, the curtain to the box swept open. A young woman in pale pink entered first, her smile bright and searching. Behind her came an older woman glittering with sapphires, followed by several other society matrons, their attention fixed on Rosalind instantly. "Your Grace," the young woman said sweetly. "I did not realize you had brought a guest. Your Grace." The words struck Rosalind like ice water. A duke. She had fallen asleep on a duke's shoulder. The man straightened fully now, presence commanding the space. His hand rested lightly, possessively, at the small of Rosalind's back. "Ladies," he said evenly, "may I introduce Miss Rosalind Thorne, a dear friend of my sister." The lie was smooth. Perfect. Rosalind's instinct screamed to correct him, to explain, to run. Instead, she curtsied and heard herself say, "It is a pleasure to meet you." Lady Cecilia, the woman in sapphires, studied her closely. "Thorne," she repeated. "I do not believe I know the family." "My sister met Miss Thorne at a lending library in Cheltenham," the Duke replied without hesitation. "They have been corresponding for some time." More lies. Delivered without effort. "And did you enjoy the performance, Miss Thorne?" one woman asked, her tone edged with judgment. Everyone knew she had slept through half of it. "The second act was beautiful," Rosalind said calmly. "I traveled this morning, and the fatigue caught me during the quieter moments. Not an apology, not a defense." The Duke's hand pressed more firmly at her back. "Well," Lady Cecilia said coolly, "I am sure we shall be seeing much more of you." When they finally left, Silence settled over the box. Rosalind turned to him, her heart racing. "What just happened? You fell asleep on my shoulder," he replied. "And now you will be staying at Carrington House." "I most certainly will not." He studied her, expression unreadable. "Did Mr. Grimley not explain the arrangement?" "What arrangement?" His gaze sharpened. "I hired him to find me someone suitable for a very specific purpose." Cold calculation entered his voice. He needed someone intelligent enough to navigate society, unknown enough to disappear later. "I am not playing a role," Rosalind said tightly. "And yet here you are," he replied softly. "Borrowed dress, borrowed place. A Duke's private box. Do tell me, Miss Thorne, where exactly will you go tonight?" The truth burned. Home. Modest rooms. A brother chasing schemes. A family barely holding on. "I am offering you an opportunity," he said, "one that benefits us both." Before she could answer, a young woman burst into the box, energy radiating from her. "Sebastian!" she exclaimed, grabbing Rosalind's hands. "Is this her?" She smiled warmly. "I am Beatrice." "And you are brilliant." Beatrice explained everything quickly. Their grandmother wanted Sebastian married. Lady Cecilia was the chosen bride. Rosalind's presence offered a distraction, a temporary courtship, a way out. "It will end quietly," Beatrice promised. "No harm done." "Except to my reputation," Rosalind said. Sebastian's voice softened. "Your reputation will remain intact. You have my word." Rosalind hesitated, then spoke. "3 conditions." His eyebrow rose. "My family must be informed properly. I want references when this ends. And if you ever decide to marry someone else, this arrangement ends immediately." Silence stretched between them. Then Sebastian extended his hand. "Agreed." She took it. The carriage ride to Carrington House felt unreal. Beatrice talked excitedly about dresses and balls. Sebastian stared out the window, unreadable. Carrington House was vast and glowing with light. Servants moved with quiet efficiency. Rosalind felt like an intruder with every step. Her guest suite was larger than her entire home. That night, alone in silk sheets that smelled of lavender, Rosalind lay awake staring at the ceiling. She had agreed to pretend to be courted by a duke. Tomorrow, she would face his grandmother, and nothing in her life would ever be the same again. Morning arrived too quickly. Soft light filtered through tall windows, touching silk curtains and gilded frames that did not belong to Rosalind's world. For a moment she lay still, confused, wondering where she was. Then memory returned all at once. The opera, the Duke, the agreement, Carrington House. Alice, her assigned maid, moved quietly about the room, laying out a pale yellow morning dress. Rosalind dressed in silence, her thoughts racing. Today she would meet the Dowager Duchess of Carrington, the woman who ruled this house, and, very likely, Sebastian's life. "She will see you at 10, Alice said gently. "Her Grace never rises earlier." That gave Rosalind less than an hour to prepare for judgment. The Dowager Duchess descended the staircase precisely on time. She was tall, silver-haired, dressed in black that somehow looked regal instead of mournful. Her blue eyes were sharp, calculating, and they fixed on Rosalind at once. "So," she said calmly, "this is the young woman who fell asleep on my grandson's shoulder." Rosalind curtsied, every lesson her mother had ever taught her rising to the surface. "Your Grace, I apologize for the unconventional introduction." "Unconventional," the Duchess repeated dryly. "Yes, that is, one word for it." She circled Rosalind slowly, examining her posture, her dress, her expression. "You are honest," she said at last. "That is rare." Sebastian appeared then, tension obvious in the line of his shoulders. "Grandmother." "Not now," she said sharply. "I wish to speak with Miss Thorne alone." The sitting-room door closed behind them. "Tell me who you truly are," the Duchess said, seating herself. Not the story my grandson invented. Rosalind did not lie. She spoke of her father's failed business, her mother's quiet strength, her brother's endless schemes, and a life shaped by careful economy. She spoke plainly, without embellishment. When she finished, silence filled the room. "You are poor," the Duchess said flatly. "Gently raised, but poor. Yes, Your Grace." "And my grandson offered you a fantasy, yes." The Duchess rose and moved to the window. "If you hurt him, I will destroy you," she said calmly. "But if you bring him back to life, I may forgive many things." It was neither blessing nor rejection. It was a warning. By the time Rosalind left the room, her hands were trembling. The days that followed were a blur of preparation, dress fittings, dance lessons, social instruction from Beatrice, who treated the whole thing like a thrilling adventure. Sebastian, meanwhile, remained distant, polite, controlled. He spoke to Rosalind only when necessary, maintaining a careful space between them. It was exactly what she expected. And yet, it hurt. The Peton ball arrived in a sweep of silk and candlelight. Rosalind stood at the top of the staircase in a cream gown embroidered with gold, her breath shallow. Sebastian waited below, immaculate and unreadable. "You look appropriate," he said. Beatrice kicked his shin. The ball was overwhelming. Music, jewels, whispers. Eyes followed Rosalind everywhere. Sebastian danced with her as promised, his hand firm at her waist, his expression carefully neutral. "Do not think," he murmured. "Just follow," she tried. For one brief dance, the world fell away. They moved together easily, the music carrying them. Applause followed, polite but curious. Lady Cecilia approached soon after. She was beautiful, confident, sharp. "You are bold," Lady Cecilia said later, once Sebastian had been called away. "Most girls know their place." "So do I," Rosalind replied quietly. The words lingered, cruel and true. That night, Rosalind asked Beatrice to leave early. She could not bear the weight of borrowed admiration. Days passed. Sebastian withdrew further, burying himself in work. Rosalind felt the distance like a wound. Then Felix grimly appeared. He admitted everything: the arrangement, the payment, the convenience. She dismissed him coldly. Sebastian found her afterward, offering a gift: a leather-bound volume of poetry. "Because I wanted to," he said. That was when something changed. The Havford musical followed, smaller and more intimate. This time, whispers reached Rosalind's ears directly. She heard herself dismissed as temporary, convenient, forgettable. Sebastian led her to a conservatory, glass walls glowing in the night. "This was not supposed to be complicated," he said quietly. "But it is," she replied. He confessed then. His grief, his fear, his exhaustion. "I feel alive when you are near," he admitted. She should have stepped away. Instead, he kissed her. It was real, unplanned, dangerous, and everything unraveled after that. The Dowager announced plans to formalize Sebastian's intentions with Lady Cecilia. Sebastian refused. The argument shattered the household. "You do not belong here," the Dowager told Rosalind later, "and you never will." That night, Rosalind packed. She left letters behind. Gratitude, goodbye. And she ran, back to the life she had known. Smaller, safer, emptier. For 3 days she tried to convince herself it was enough. Then Felix returned. Sebastian was unraveling. "One conversation," Rosalind said finally. "That is all." The carriage carried her back to Carrington House, her heart pounding with fear and hope in equal measure. She found Sebastian waiting in the library, exhausted and undone. "I love you," he said simply. And for the first time, Rosalind believed that love might be worth the risk. But the world would not make it easy. Not yet. Rosalind stood in the library with her hands clenched together, the familiar scent of old books and wood smoke pressing in around her. This room had once felt like a refuge. Now it felt like a place where everything would be decided. Sebastian stood across from her, his usual control gone. His hair was unkempt, his jacket discarded, dark circles beneath his eyes speaking of sleepless nights. "I meant what I said," he told her quietly. "I love you, not the idea of you." You. Her chest tightened. "Sebastian, loving me does not change the world we live in. Then let us change the part of it that belongs to us." She shook her head. "Your grandmother was right about one thing. I would always be the wrong choice. Every mistake you make, every disappointment, they would blame me." He stepped closer. "I am already blamed for refusing a marriage I do not want. At least this way, I choose something real." Before she could answer, the door opened. The Dowager Duchess entered without apology, her cane striking the floor with sharp authority. "So," she said coolly, "the drama continues." Sebastian straightened. "Grandmother, this concerns us." "It concerns the entire family," she replied. "And the reputation of a title older than either of you." Rosalind stepped forward before Sebastian could speak. Her voice shook, but she did not retreat. "Your Grace, I never intended to cause this much upheaval. I agreed to a temporary arrangement. I never expected," she paused, then continued firmly, "to fall in love." The Dowager studied her closely. "Love," she said. "That dangerous word again." "Yes," Rosalind replied. "And I understand what it costs. I understand I will be judged, measured, found lacking. But I also understand what it costs to walk away from something that matters." The older woman was silent for a long moment. "You remind me of his mother," she said at last, "just as stubborn, just as fearless. I opposed that marriage too, and I was wrong." Sebastian inhaled sharply. "I will not pretend this is sensible," the Dowager continued. "It will cause gossip. It will cause disapproval. But I will not stand in the way of a choice made with clear eyes." Relief flooded Rosalind so suddenly she nearly swayed. "You will have my support," the Dowager said stiffly. "Publicly. Privately, I reserve the right to complain endlessly." Sebastian crossed the room and embraced his grandmother, emotion breaking through his restraint. Rosalind watched, tears blurring her vision. The announcement followed days later. At the Sinclair Ball, London society gathered, eager for spectacle. Rosalind stood at the top of the staircase in deep sapphire silk, her heart pounding. Sebastian offered his arm. "Ready?" he murmured. "No," she said honestly. "But I am here." They descended together. The whispers began immediately. Sebastian led her to the center of the ballroom. When the music ended, he turned to her and dropped to one knee. The room gasped. "Rosalind Thorne," he said clearly, "you fell asleep on my shoulder and woke me up. You reminded me that living is not the same as enduring. Will you marry me?" Her answer came without hesitation. "Yes." Applause burst from one side of the room, shocked silence from another. Rosalind did not care. Sebastian rose and kissed her, scandal and joy blending into one perfect moment. The Dowager watched from the edge of the crowd. After a heartbeat, she nodded once. It was enough. Marriage did not erase every challenge. Some doors closed, others opened slowly. Rosalind learned that belonging was not given freely, but claimed. She learned how to stand beside Sebastian, not behind him. She learned how to answer judgment with calm and kindness. She learned that love did not erase fear, but made it worth facing. Sebastian learned how to laugh again, how to leave his study before midnight, how to speak of his father without flinching. 6 months later, Rosalind stood in the Carrington House library, now truly hers. She held a letter she had found tucked inside a book Sebastian's father had loved. It spoke of courage, of choosing love despite loss, Sebastian found her there, drawing her into his arms. "You fell asleep on my shoulder," he said softly, "and changed my life." She smiled against his chest. It seems accidents can be very powerful things. Outside, the world continued to whisper. Inside, they were exactly where they belonged.